So on this episode, I'm going to be taking you through the tier rankings for the Dominaria Precon Commanders. The commanders from the Precons, not the regular set. That is a completely separate episode because, my goodness, during this spoiler season did we get a ton of commanders. I mean, I think if my calculations are correct and my memory is correct, we got 41 commanders in the set itself, an additional 34 in these Precons and, yeah, commander products. My goodness, is that a ton of commanders, and yeah, if I was to do like, just one tier ranking on all those, that would take like 2 hours. So yeah, I had to split them up, and yeah, here we are. Now, obviously, if you want to go see those other tier rankings, make sure you check those out, but stay tuned to this one because, yeah, there's some really exciting commanders and a couple of notes just before we get into it. First off, these tier rankings are 100% based off of my own opinions, and your opinions on these commanders might differ, and that's okay. And along with that, these tier rankings are based off of casual commander. Again, I am a casual commander player. I do not play competitive commander. So sure, a certain commander might, be great for a combo strategy where you're trying to combo, on turn 1 or 2 or whatnot. That is not being taken into account. That CEDH style of a deck is not being taken into account. The casual version of, these decks for these commanders is more so what is being considered. Now, with these different tier rankings, I'm going to be taking through the D tier, which is the lowest tier ranking of these commanders, up to the C, B, A, and then eventually to the S tier, which is the most powerful out of all these commanders from the Precon Commander products. And also another note to keep in mind is that these tier rankings are done in a vacuum, meaning that it's just these tier rankings with these commanders in comparison to each other. It does not include commanders outside of these. So an S tier commander from this list might not be as powerful as an S tier commander from another list because, again, it's done within the vacuum of, again, the Dominaria Precon commanders, just the 34 or so, or whatever number it is, again, commanders in this episode. Also, one more thing before we jump into this episode. Again, a big thank you to Eddie for all the help throughout spoiler season and for the help on all these rankings. And yes, if I make any mistakes on this episode or if you don't like the rankings, blame Eddie in the comments below. And now with all that said, let's jump into it. So to start things off, we've got the D tier, that's right, the lowest power commanders, and we're going to start things off with Moira Urborg Haunt, a 3/2 Spirit Wizard with Menace that costs 2 and a black. When it deals combat damage to a player, return to the battlefield target creature card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn. So for this commander to provide you value, it needs to actually deal damage to a player, so it has to get through. Now, yes, Menace is a pretty good form of evasion, but one that is definitely not perfect, and there are definitely going to be circumstances where, well, you're not able to get your commander through, or it's going to be very risky to get your commander through, or to try to. And with Moira just being a 3/2, it can be very easy to, double block and take out without, much thought, and yeah, then you just don't have any value generation from this. And of course, if you don't have any creatures actually leaving the battlefield either, even if you do get your commander through, there's no value there too. So yeah, for all these reasons, Moira just really isn't all that inspiring or all that impactful of a commander, and definitely a D tier commander, in my opinion. And speaking of D tier commanders, next up we've got the Lady of Oteria, a 5/5 avatar for 3 red-green that says you may tap 3 untapped dwarves you control rather than pay the spell's mana cost. And at the beginning of each end step, if a land you controlled was put in a graveyard from the battlefield this turn, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put any number of dwarf cards from them into your hand, put the rest above your library in a random order. Now, this commander is one that has a lot of potential in maybe quite a few years when we get more and more dwarf cards to support a dwarf tribal build. But at this point, there really just aren't that many good dwarfs out there. So yeah, this commander is quite limited in what it can do and how effective it can be. Again, as the years go on though, and we hopefully get more dwarf support, well, then we can, utilize those dwarves to get this into play for free, which is great. And also, yeah, to be able to get more and more dwarves off the top of our library. At this point, we just have a lot of not very efficient, not very effective dwarves to pick from, so because of that, the Lady of Oteria, well, you are a D tier commander. And finally, rounding up the D tier, we've got Ohabi Caleria, a 1/3 elf archer with reach that costs 1 green-white. It has untap all archers you control during each other player's untap step, and whenever an archer you control deals combat into a creature, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. So, again, just like I mentioned with the previous commander, whereas Dwarf Tribal really doesn't have all that much support, Archer Tribal has basically probably even less support than that. So, yeah, being able to untap your archers during each of the player's untap step is great if you can get some effective archers, but we need, more effective archers to come out for that to be, very impactful. And then also, again, yes, some great potential card advantage with this as well that you do have to pay for, but still, it can provide a good amount of card advantage throughout the game if you are able to, utilize effective archers with this commander when more effective archers come out and are printed. So for all of those reasons, oh Hobby Caleria, you are rounding out the D tier. Next up though, let's move up from the D tier to the C tier with some slightly more powerful commanders. Not quite up to the middle of the road just yet though. We're going to start things off with Zerium Golden Wind, and my apologies if I'm mispronouncing any of these names. Zerium is a 3/4 Griffin flying that costs 3 and a white. It says whenever a Griffin you control deals combat to a player, create a 2/2 white Griffin creature token with flying. Now, like I mentioned with the previous two commanders, Griffins are, well, probably even supported less than those other two tribes. It is not a very supported tribe at all. That being said, the reason that Zerium has made it into the C tier and is not stuck down in the D tier is that Zerium is obviously a Griffin itself, and when it hits an opponent, cool, you get a Griffin token with flying again, which is evasive. Then if each of those get through, cool, you get 2 more. And you can see how this can keep multiplying essentially because, yeah, you can make Griffin tokens with this commander, which can make even more Griffin tokens. And of course, in mono white, you've got ways to give this double strike and give your creatures double strike to make a lot of Griffins. That being said, yeah, there's not a lot of Griffin support out there, and this is very, very, very dependent on you being able to connect with your commander. And if you are, stop or wrap at a certain point, it can reset your entire board essentially, and it can take you a long time to try to build back up. So, Zerium, you are most definitely a C tier commander. Moving on though, the Peregrine Dynamo is a very, very interesting commander, a 1/5 construct that has haste, and it costs 3. It has to pay 1 and tap it, copy, target, activated, or triggered ability you control from another legendary source that's not a commander. You may choose new targets for the copy. Now, this is a commander that I was actually pretty excited to kind of see at first. Now, it's just like, oh, another colorless commander, great. And the one that is doing something completely different, and it looks like it can be very spicy. Unfortunately, when it comes to the amount of things that you're going to be copying, if this is your commander, that list is actually pretty short on, effective things that you really care about copying. Again, it has to be a legendary source, and of course not your commander because it can't just copy its own things. But yeah, because of the limitations of this being a colorless commander, not having a very large pool at all, and again, an even smaller pool of actually things that this can target, it is a C tier commander. There's still some exciting things that you can do with it, but again, its card pool is really, really, really limited on what you're going to be able to do with it. So at the end of the day, the Peregrine Dynamo, you are a C tier commander. Next up, Hazazon is back, and this time as the Shaper of Sand, a 3/3 human warrior that costs red, green, white, and it's got Desert Walk, which means it can't be blocked as long as the defending player controls a desert, so that's nice. I mean, most players out there aren't running deserts, but sure. Okay, anyways, you may play desert lands from your graveyard. Whenever a desert enters the battlefield under your control, create 2 1/1 red, green, and white Sand Warrior creature tokens. Now, this is a commander that can get better with, again, the more and more desert support we get. If we end up getting any more deserts, maybe if we go back to Amonkhet, we'll be getting more deserts. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I think there are around 20 or so deserts out there that this can utilize, maybe at the most. And yeah, some that really aren't all that effective. So this is a commander that I think can have some future potential. And of course, in these colors, there are some ways that you can really take advantage of making a bunch of creature tokens, or ways to make even more, make them more powerful. But yes, out of all the commanders from these commander products, there are just more effective ones out there. So Hazazon, Shaper of the Sand, you are a C tier commander. Joining in the C tier, though, we've got another commander that can actually make tokens as well, with a Kobold commander with Roznacht, Hair of Roga, and my apologies if I mispronounced that name. Roz is what I like to call this commander. A 0/1 Kobold warrior that costs a red that has Battle Cry, so when it attacks, it can pump your other attacking creatures +1/+0, and also Heroic, Whenever you cast a spell that targets Raz, create a 0/1 red Kobold creature token named Kobolds of Care Keep. Now this is a very low to the ground and very aggressive commander, and it can make you a lot of tokens throughout the game. However, again, although it can pump those tokens, again, it's just making 0/1s. So this can give you some nice initial value out of spells that you're going to be utilizing to target this, which is nice, but I think the potential of this commander is pretty capped, actually. Definitely an interesting and unique commander at that, but one that, again, when it comes to actual power, when it comes to raw power, it's just not even quite to that middle-of-the-road power level. So yeah, Raz, I am sorry, but you belong in the C tier. But joining you in the C tier is Ramirez DiPietro, Pillager, a 4/3 human pirate that costs 2 blue, black, and it says, when Ramirez enters the battlefield, you lose 2 life and create 2 treasure tokens. Whenever one or more pirates you control deal combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled. Now, pirates do have a decent amount of support, not a ton of support, but a decent amount. And actually, if this commander did have access to red, it would probably bump up another tier. But unfortunately, well, it doesn't. And some of the best pirates out there, like say Dockside Extortionist, this cannot utilize. And while this does give you treasures for when it comes into play, of course you can utilize blink spells and blink effects to actually, use and abuse this to get more and more temporary mana advantage. You also, do have a limit to that because you are losing life every single time this commander does come into play. So with all these factors in mind, Ramirez, DiPietro, you are a C tier commander. Next up though, we've got a very different kind of a commander with a very different kind of, let's call it tribe, with Jasmine Boreal of the 7. Jasmine is a 2/4 human druid that costs 1 green-white that has tap, add green-white, spend this mana only to cast creature spells with no abilities. And on top of that, creatures you control with no abilities can't be blocked by creatures with abilities. So this is a vanilla creature tribal commander, and one that can help you cast them, again, quite effectively, because, again, this is a 3-mana commander that can tap for 2. That being said, although you can lean into vanilla creature tribal, it might be more effective just as a token commander, with one that, essentially just make a bunch of tokens, without abilities, essentially, just a bunch of, plain 1/1 soldiers or whatnot, or, 2/2 cats or whatever you're going to be making. As long as they don't have abilities, they are essentially unblockable, to the vast majority of creatures out there. Your opponents aren't going to be running vanilla creatures. Now, if they do have tokens themselves that don't have any abilities or any keywords, yes, they can block them as well, but in a lot of circumstances, you can just have an unblockable army of tokens. So while this commander can't help you actually make those tokens and doesn't really, benefit you in any other way than just making them unblockable, essentially, yeah, that can be effective once you get set up. But again, at the end of the day, with all these factors in mind, Jasmine, you are, in my opinion, a C tier commander. Joining you in the C tier, though, we've got Tobias Doomed Conqueror, a 3/2 human soldier with flash that costs 2 white-blue. It has, when it dies, for each non-token creature you control that died this turn, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So this commander does have some limitations that makes it, well, quite a bit weaker than it could have been. The first limitation is that this commander actually has to die to get that trigger, versus it being, maybe potentially like an ETB that you can get after a board wipe, essentially. So yes, while you can flash your commander in, you also are basically flashing your commander into danger to actually make the most out of it. And speaking of making the most out of it, this commander is also limited in that it only counts non-token creatures that died. If this counted token creatures, that would be a different story, and this could have a lot more potential, but alas, it does not. So Tobias Doom Conqueror, have fun conquering the C tier, or at least attempting to. You are in the C tier is what I mean. Next up, let's move on to Jedit Ojanen Mercenary, a 3/3 cat mercenary for 1 white-blue that says, whenever it or another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay green. If you do, create a 2/2 green cat warrior creature token with Forest Walk. So overall, yeah, that is a decent effect. It's definitely not one of the most powerful things that we've ever seen, but it's decent. Yeah, so like legend, tribal, and Bant, making a decent amount of, cat warrior creature tokens that can be obviously more impactful. Again, if you are playing against opponents that might have forests, yes, that can be a lot more impactful. If not, less impactful, if not being unblockable cats, but still. If that triggered ability did not cost mana to actually utilize, I can definitely see this one being pushed up a bit, but yeah, having to actually dedicate a good amount of mana when you are trying to get your legendary creatures in play just to make some extra cat creature tokens. There are more powerful effects from more powerful commanders out there, and so because of all of that, you are a C tier commander. Moving on, a commander that was powered down, let's just say in a way. Let's talk about Rasputin, the Oniromancer, and I'm not sure if I said that correctly, so my apologies if I'm wrong, but yeah, a 4/1 human wizard that costs 1 white-blue. Now, the old Rasputin is definitely one that could combo quite effectively. This one is a bit more limited. When it enters the battlefield, put a dream counter on it for each opponent you have, and each opponent creates a 1/1 goblin creature token. You can tap to remove one or more dream counters from it to add that much colorless, and you can tap to remove a dream counter from it to create a 2/2 white knight creature token with protection from red. Having to actually tap to actually utilize that mana from those dream counters is, again, it's a limited source, and again, it does definitely prevent, kind of combo potential with this in many ways. On top of that, again, when you are getting a benefit by getting those dream counters on this, you're also giving your opponent a benefit by giving them creature tokens. Now, yes, you can utilize those dream counters as well for knights, but that can also be decently slow, and yeah, I mean, again, at the end of the day, this just is a very much powered down version in some ways of the old Rasputin, and definitely deserving of being in the C tier. Next up, General Marholt Elsdragon is a 4/4 elf warrior that costs 2 red-green that says, whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, it gets +3/+3 until end of turn for each creature blocking it. So that is actually a decent effect, and yes, I mean, you can be pretty aggressive with this commander. If you've got a bunch of low-to-the-ground creatures, you can swing more effectively because your opponents are going to be more hesitant to block because your creatures get an additional +3/+3 if they are actually blocked for each creature blocking. That being said, then there are going to be times where your opponents are just like, okay, I'm fine with not blocking, and I'll just take some damage, and I'll crack back at you with bigger creatures, or again, if they have really big creatures, they are able to effectively block your low-to-the-ground creatures. On the other hand, if you invest in some bigger creatures yourself, you can definitely be more effective in combat, but you are going to be slower. So while this commander can provide you an interesting and unique effect, there are definitely going to be times where it's more effective than others, and yeah, just overall, not providing you really value in any other ways, this commander is definitely, in my opinion, a C tier commander. Moving on, we've got Roga Carekeep Overlord, a 4/4 Kobold warrior that costs 3 black-red, and it says other kobolds you control get +2/+2. And whenever you cast a kobold spell, you may pay 2. If you do, create a 2/2 red dragon creature token with flying. And whenever you cast a dragon spell, create a 0/1 red kobold creature token named Kobolds of Carekeep. So this commander can be, kobold tribal. This commander can be dragon tribal. It can be a combination of both, whatever direction you really want to take it. That being said, this commander would definitely be bumped up in power level if it didn't have that, you have to pay for, the dragon token. If just by casting a kobold spell, you got a free dragon token, that would be much more powerful. Even if that dragon itself was smaller, let's say, a 3/3 or a 2/2 with flying, if you'd have to pay for it, I think that would be a lot more impactful because, again, kobolds generally are, either 1 or even 0 mana, so you can get just free value out of getting those in play. And of course, in this color combination, there's plenty of ways to get those, kobolds back to your hand, maybe by getting them into your graveyard, maybe by sacrificing them, and you've got plenty of ways to then get them from your graveyard back to your hand and then recast them for more dragon value. So yes, I mean, I do think that this commander did have potential, but that limitation, though, really takes it down a notch. And yeah, again, at the end of the day, Roga, you are a C tier commander. Finally, though, rounding out the C tier, we've got Baru Wormspeaker, a 3/3 human druid that says worms you control get +2/+2 and have trample, and by paying 7 and a green, you can tap to create a 4/4 green worm creature token. So it costs X less to activate Rex the greatest power among worms you control. So this is a decent commander, one that can actually make you a worm army pretty quickly once you get things set up. Again, if you've got ways to actually untap this and to tap it again, well, you can make a lot of worms. And just by having even one of these worms in play, with that Anthem, it's going to be basically a 6/6 worm, which reduces that cost of the activation to just 1 and a green. And of course, if you can get an even bigger worm in play, great. You can take that cost all the way down to green. So yes, once you get things set up and going, you can really get things going. That being said, there are only so many worm kind of effects out there, or worm cards out there. But yeah, this commander can utilize them effectively. And again, by giving them +2/+2 and trample, you can get a lot of damage through with this once you get things going. So Baru Wormspeaker, you are a very solid C tier commander. But now let's move on to the middle-of-the-road commanders with a 5-color commander with Jared Carthalion, a 5 starting loyalty planeswalker that costs Wooburg, and it has +1. Create a 3/3 combo creature token with trample, that's all colors. -3, choose up to 2 target creatures for each of them. Put a number of +1 counters on it equal to the number of colors it is. And then it's -6 is return target multicolor card from your graveyard to your hand. If that card was all colors, draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. So that ultimate is kind of a letdown and really isn't all that impactful. Creating a Kavu army is pretty fun, but yeah, only so powerful. And yes, you can get those Kavus to become pretty massive with that -3 as well. It does take some time to set up though. Now, obviously, another direction could just be, cool, Planeswalker, tribal or whatever, Super Friends deck. And sure, just at a base level, a 5-color Super Friends deck with a commander like this one, there are more effective Super Friends commanders out there, most likely, yes. But still, at a base level, yeah, it's going to be a middle-of-the-road deck. So, Jared Carthalion, you are starting off the B tier. Even though I love Kavus, you are starting off the B tier. And joining you in the B tier is Orca Siege Demon, a 5/5 demon with trample that costs 5 black-red. It has whenever their creature dies, put a +1 counter on Orca Siege Demon, and when Orca dies, it deals damage equal to its power divided as you choose among any number of targets. So this commander is actually pretty exciting. It just has one main thing that's really holding it back from being at a higher tier, and that's its incredibly high converted mana cost at 7. So yeah, once you get this into play, it can become massive. Again, it counts any creatures dying. It does not specify, non-token or just yours. Any creatures dying can become massive, and a massive threat at that, having trample. But of course, even when it's dealt with, it actually gets to deal out damage equal to its power to any number of targets, so it can take out even more things or, just players themselves. But yeah, at the end of the day, because of that incredibly high mana cost, this is a B tier commander. If this cost, quite a bit less, maybe had less power to start and, less toughness, I could definitely see it potentially moving up higher. But at 7 mana, that is a lot. So Orca, welcome to the B tier. Next up, let's talk about Savitri Dragon Master, a 4 starting loyalty planeswalker that costs 2 blue-black. Savitri has +1 until your next turn. Creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless their controller pays 2 for each of those creatures. And -3, search your library for a dragon card, reveal it, put in your hand, then shuffle. And -7, destroy all non-dragon creatures. So this Planeswalker commander can pretty effectively try to prevent your opponents from actually attacking you. Now players can still come through on you and your Planeswalkers, but they have to pay life to actually do that. Forcing them to pay mana would probably be more effective, but still life is somewhat of a deterrent. That being said, if you don't have any other defenses, they still might be willing to send, a decently sized creature at your Planeswalker to try to take it out. Next up though, it's -3, being able to go get any dragon card is fantastic. That being said, again, you are limited to just, your 2 colors of blue and black, so your dragon options are more limited. If this was a commander that was 5 colors, yeah, this thing would be at a higher tier. But alas, it is a 2-color commander, and yeah, blue-black aren't exactly the best dragon colors out there. So, Savitri, you are a B tier commander. And speaking of dragon commanders, next up there's Bladewing Deathless Tyrant, and it is a 6/6 dragon skeleton with flying and haste that costs 5 black-red. It says, when it deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, for each creature card in your graveyard, create a 2/2 black zombie knight creature token with menace. Now, that can be a massive effect, but like I mentioned on a previous commander that I believe for the exact same mana cost, right, with Orca, yeah, 7 mana is a ton to pay for a commander like this. And it does require some setup to actually get a decent enough creature cards in your graveyard, but obviously once you do, you can have some very massive plays, but also all your progress can, be just essentially stalled or stopped with a, like a Bajukabog. Something that can just take out your graveyard can really stop your value with this commander. So again, because of that, and again, because of the massive mana cost, although you can swing right away, still massive mana cost at 7, Bladewing Deathless Tyrant, you are a B tier commander. Joining you in the B tier, though, is Stang Echo Warrior, a 3/4 human warrior for 2 red-green. It has, when it attacks, create Stang Twin, a legendary 3/4 red and green human warrior creature token. It enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. For each aura and equipment attached to Stang, create a token that's a copy of it. Attached to Stang, sacrifice all tokens created this way at the beginning of the next end step. Now, this commander actually has a good amount of potential, but it does require quite a bit of setup to actually get going. And when it comes to utilizing auras, yeah, you can make copies of those auras, but again, auras themselves can be pretty flimsy. If this commander gets dealt with, well, all your auras are, for the most part, depending on the aura, they're mostly just gone. And of course, if the commander is dealt with, you have to re-equip all your equipment too. So yeah, the normal problems that Voltron commanders do have, you can do some other exciting things where you can utilize, equipment and auras entering the battlefield and such like that. But still, Voltron commanders just essentially have a couple of weaknesses that make them quite a bit weaker. And yes, this is just definitely a B tier commander. Doesn't have any kind of protection, doesn't have any way to actually attack right away. It just has a pretty cool attack trigger, but one that is limited in some ways. So again, Stang Echo Warrior, you are a B tier commander. Next up, we've got another commander that cares about attacking with a Yesha Tanaka Armorer. Yesha is a 2/4 human artificer that costs 3 white-blue, and it says when it attacks, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may put any number of artifact cards with mana value less than or equal to a Yesha's power from among them on the battlefield tapped, put the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. And a Yesha can't be blocked as long as the defending player controls 3 or more artifacts. So this is a potentially unblockable commander. 3 is a decent amount of artifacts to have in play, especially earlier on in the game. Now, the later the game goes, the more likely it is that someone might have that. And if you're playing against an artifact, a themed deck, then that's probably going to happen. But still, don't count on that necessarily. But with this commander, once you are set up and once you can grow its power, you can get a decent amount of things off the top of your library into play for free. That being said, again, this commander does require a decent amount of setup, and again, it does require it to, attack, and at 5 mana, that's, a decent chunk of mana as well. Not a ton, but it doesn't allow you to really be all that aggressive with this commander and just get things going. Again, this commander does require setup, a decent amount at that, and you can get lucky an opponent can have 3 or more artifacts, but they might not. So at the end of the day, with all these things taken into account, Yesha Tanaka Armorer, you are a B tier commander. Moving on though, we've got the ever-changing Dane, a 3/3 shapeshifter for white, blue, black that has pay 1, sacrifice another creature. The ever-changing Dane becomes a copy of the sacrificed creature, except it has this ability. So this is kind of like a weird clone in a way, and yeah, there are some decently exciting things that you can do with this. Of course, you can change this commander into a creature that maybe can't be blocked, and then you can get it through an opponent. You can change it into a creature that might have, hexproof or ward, and if a player tries to target it, then you can save it. Or you can utilize this commander to actually sacrifice your opponent's creatures, probably their most powerful creatures, by, maybe temporarily gain control of their creature and then just sacrificing it instead of giving it back to that player. So this commander definitely in some ways can be dependent on how powerful your opponent's decks are or how powerful some of their creatures are. So yeah, again, just a middle of the road commander in my opinion, one that can be really impactful depending on the circumstances, but also can fall flat in some ways. So the ever-changing Dane, you are not changing your spot, and you are a B tier commander. Next up, we've got yet another 7 mana commander with Torsten, founder of Dominaria, a 7/7 human soldier that costs 5 green, white. So that is a ton of mana, but this does have a big effect. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 7 cards of your library, put any number of creature, card, and or land cards from among them into your hand, the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. And when Torsten dies, create 7 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. So this commander has a great ETB and a great death trigger, but again, at 7 mana, that is a ton. And this is just not game-ending effects. These are very good effects, very powerful effects, but not game-ending. And with this commander being 7 mana, it's a lot of investment. Now, of course, you can make the most of that investment, maybe if you lean so heavily into, creatures, well, and lands obviously too, but in creatures, so that you can get a lot of creatures off the top of your library and a lot of value essentially every single time this ETBs. And of course, there might be some ways that you can take advantage of the death trigger as well. But at the end of the day, as powerful those effects are, it's still a lot to ask for a 7 mana commander. So yes, Torsten, you also, with the other 7 mana commanders, are in the B tier. Moving on though, we've got a 5 mana commander with Torwaki the Younger, a 3/3 human archer with reach and lifelink that costs 3 black, red. It has, if another source you control deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage plus 1 to that permanent player instead. And whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, Torwaki the Younger does 2 damage to any target. So this commander can actually be taken in a couple of different directions. Yeah, if you go for a spellslinger type approach, you can just ping a bunch of things, kind of like a shock in addition to, whatever other effect your instant sorcery has. And on top of that, you're gaining life again because that damage is dealt by Torwaki in that lifelink. That being said, a potentially more effective way to build on this commander might be instead to build more like a group slug type strategy where, you have, these repeatable ways to damage, everyone essentially, hopefully your opponents more often than you, but yeah, everyone. So you can just punish everyone and you can punish them even more because again, this commander can add an additional point of damage for each of those instances. And yeah, that can really add up throughout the game. So definitely a solid commander, not the most powerful one out there, but yeah, a very solid commander that can be built in a couple different ways. So again, at the end of the day, Torwaki the Younger, you are a B tier commander. Finally though, rounding out the B tier, we've got Zyra the Golden Sting, a 3/3 insect assassin with flying and haste that costs 1 black, red, green. It has, whenever it attacks, put an egg counter on another target creature without an egg counter on it. When that creature dies with an egg counter on it, draw a card and create a 1/1 black insect creature token with flying. So this commander is all about setting up potential value, and yes, it is on an attack trigger, but this commander does have flying, so typically you're going to be safe to attack. The key to this commander though is setting yourself up in ways that you can get this attack trigger more than once in a turn, or at least getting the result more than once. So, I mean, especially effective card with this is like Radiant Performer, which can just essentially make it so that you get eggs on everything, or, you know, ways to get additional combats might help, or, you know, ways to double up on that trigger with like a Saronic Resonator. Making sure that you can get more and more egg counters out there can provide you a lot of value. Now, once you're set up, things can get pretty crazy. I mean, again, being able to draw, you know, maybe even 20 cards in a single turn and get 20, you know, tokens in a single turn with a board wipe, that can be great. Again, it does take a good amount of setup to get there. So at the end of the day, Zyra the Golden Sting, you are, in my opinion, a B tier commander. But now it's time for us to move on to the A tier commanders, ones that are just underneath that top tier. And we're going to start things off with Shanded Sleeper's Scourge. A 2/4 human knight with menace that costs 1 red, white, black, and it says other legendary creatures you control have menace. On top of that, whenever you play a legendary land or cast a legendary spell, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. This commander can provide you an absurd amount of card advantage throughout the game, and this is the kind of a commander that, well, with the higher budget that you have, probably the more powerful this can be, because yeah, some of the best cards for this commander are probably some legendary lands that can get incredibly expensive. But again, the more legendary lands that you have in your deck, the more potential card advantage you can just have from just playing one of your lands. So yeah, a legendary tribal deck around this commander can of course be quite effective. And yeah, I mean, your legendary creatures having menace is definitely nice as well, you know, a way to potentially help get them through. Definitely a very powerful commander, one that is not quite to that top tier, but definitely one that can provide you a crazy amount of value, again, especially on a higher budget that can afford, you know, those legendary lands that, well, can draw you a lot of cards throughout the game. So at the end of the day, Shanded Sleeper's Scourge, you are an A tier commander. And joining you in the A tier is Ramses Assassin Lord, a 4/4 human assassin with Death Touch that costs 2 blue, black. It says other assassins you control get ++1, and whenever a player loses the game, if they are attacked this turn by an assassin you controlled, you win the game. So that is a pretty absurd effect, and I mean, if this commander really didn't have all that much going except for just that, it still might be an A tier commander. Because all your opponents really need to be very wary when you are playing this commander, because, well, if any of your opponents get low, and it doesn't matter again if you actually got that player low, if your other opponents actually took their life totals down, if you're able to finish that player off and you attack them with just 1 assassin, you win. You essentially just win for taking out 1 player instead of all 3, which in a multiplayer format is an incredibly powerful thing. So yeah, your opponents have to be very careful. And of course, yes, there are a lot of powerful assassins out there. But again, I mean, yeah, that's just an absurd effect, and nearly one of the most powerful commanders in this set just because of that effect. So at the end of the day, Ramses, definitely an A tier commander. Next up though, let's move on to Varric Warped Sangir, a 2/2 vampire with flying, Death Touch, and lifelink that costs 1 white, black. It says whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, if life was paid to activate it, you may pay that much life again. If you do, copy that ability, you may choose targets for the copy. So being able to double up on an ability without actually having to pay mana is a very powerful thing. Now, yes, it does cost you life to do so, but life is, well, pretty plentiful in Commander. You have, you know, access to a lot of spells and a lot of ways to gain a lot of life in these colors. And also, yeah, I mean, you start off at, well, 40 life, and you've got a flying Death Touch lifelinker to gain you even more life too. Now, the only thing that is holding this commander back is that, yes, there are some great effects out there that you can double up on this, but it's still, you know, not too large of a pool. There is a good sized pool, and as the years go on, I'm sure there's going to get access to even more great cards that, you know, you can double up on, but at this point, this is not quite to that S tier ranking because, again, of the limited application. So, Varric, you are an A tier commander. Moving on, next up we've got Tetsuo Imperial Champion, a 3/3 human samurai for blue, black, red. Tetsuo has, when it attacks, if it's equipped, choose 1. It deals damage equal to the highest mana value among equipment attached to it to any target, or you may cast an instant sorcery spell from your hand with mana value less than or equal to the highest mana value among equipment attached to Tetsuo without paying its mana cost. So this commander can provide you a good amount of value throughout the game. I mean, either by taking out targets by pinging them down, I mean, taking, you know, out opponents too by pinging them down as well. I mean, if you are able to give this commander even just Death Touch, even if you just have a tiny piece of equipment on this commander, you can take out basically any creature on the board with just an attack. And also, if you are able to get, you know, bigger and bigger equipments on this can dish out a lot of damage or let you cast, you know, some big spells essentially for free for a ton of value. Or, if you're like me, you can just get tiny equipment on this and just cast, 0 mana cost essentially spells like, Inevitable Betrayal, which you're not supposed to be able to cast from your hand. Cast from your hand. So have fun with that build. But yeah, at the end of the day, a commander that can provide you a lot of value, a very solid commander, and in my opinion, an A tier commander. Next up, we've got Emperor Mihail II, a 3/3 Merfolk Noble for 1 blue that says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast Merfolk spells from the top of your library. Whenever you cast a Merfolk spell, you may pay 1. If you do, create a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature token. So this is a pretty effective Merfolk tribal commander. It is doing quite a bit for you. It is decently low to the ground at just 3 mana. It gives you access to the top of your library. So yeah, I mean, first of all, let's just say that you might want to also include maybe some ways that you can actually mill yourself to ensure that you can get to actually valuable cards off the top of your library, ensure that you've got something on top that you can utilize, like, those Merfolk spells that you can just keep casting off the top of your library. So it's kind of like an extension of your hand. And of course, when you are getting those Merfolk spells and you are casting them, you just have to pay 1 extra mana for a 1/1 Merfolk, which can be massive again, because if you are utilizing a lot of fantastic tribal effects, and there are a lot of fantastic Merfolk tribal effects out there, it's a very supported tribe, you can just, make that 1/1 Merfolk into something very deadly. With all those lords out there and other effects, you can get a lot of value out of this commander. So yeah, a well-supported commander that supports its tribe well, yeah, Emperor Mihail II, you are an A tier commander. Moving on, we've got Jensen Carthalion, Druid Exile, a 2/2 human druid for green-white. It has whenever you cast a multicolored spell, scry 1. If that spell is all colors, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance, and by paying 5, you can tap it to add Wooburg. First up, there are ways to actually make even more out of that activation. I mean, first up, that's basically just at this point filtering, which is great because it can help you cast what spells you need to, but you also have ways that you can actually reduce that cost so that you can actually gain mana on that as well. Next up, you can get a lot of value throughout the game just by having your commander in play. Again, when you're casting multicolored spells, again, if you've got a multicolored spell tribal deck, you're going to be doing that all the time. You can just keep scrying again and again and again to get you the right spells that you need. And yeah, if you've got maybe like a 5-color tribal deck, you can get even more value out of this commander by making an army of angel tokens. And again, those have flying and vigilance. And of course, there are plenty of powerful 5-color cards out there. And yeah, this commander can just benefit you even more by playing those powerful cards. And yeah, just, generating an army, helping you scry a ton to get you the right cards. This commander has a good amount of potential, and again, it's a 5-color commander, so you've got access to all the cards out there. So for all those reasons, Jensen Carthalion, Druid Exile, you are an A-tier commander. Moving on, we've got Dihana, Binder of Wills, a 5 starting loyalty planeswalker named Dihana that costs 1 red, white, black. The +2 is up to 1 target legendary creature gains vigilance, lifelink, and indestructible until your next turn. The -3 is reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put any number of legendary cards among them into your hand and the rest in your graveyard. Create a treasure token for each card put in your graveyard this way. And the -11 is gain control of all non-land permanents until end of turn. Untap them to gain haste until end of turn. So that ultimate is very much a I win the game type of ultimate. And it's not really all that hard to actually get to 11 with this because, well, this commander kind of encourages you to just keep destroying the board. Because with that +2, again, if you got a legendary creature tribal deck with this commander, cool, let's get a legendary creature out. Okay, I'm going to give it vigilance, lifelink, indestructible, and then I'm just going to wipe the board with a Wrath of God or something like that and take out all the creatures except for, this one, which I will hit an opponent with, get a lot of value out of, and it's going to stick around. To then protect my commander, which, I already wiped my opponent's boards, but I can just stick around to protect my commander. I get more things into play, and yeah. Eventually, you can allow your opponents to build things back up and just alt and beat them with that, or, you can just get a ton of value with that -3, getting things off the top of your library into your hand. And again, for everything that you don't get into your hand, you're getting a treasure token. So you can just -3, get 4 treasures, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, this commander can provide you a ton of value and can be a game-winning condition in itself. So yeah, Dihana, Binder of Wills, an A-tier commander. But moving on, let's move on to the final A-tier commander with Greensleeves, Morrow Sorcerer. Greensleeves is a star elemental that costs 3 green. It's got protection from planeswalkers and from wizards, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control, and whenever a land enters battlefield under control, create a 3/3 green badger creature token. This commander, yes, can be very straightforward, but very powerful. Obviously, you run green, you've got a ton of ways, an absurd amount of ways to get an absurd amount of lands out very quickly. And with just a single, even just say Evolving Wilds, just cracking Evolving Wilds, getting in play, cracking it, that is, what, 2 3/3, so 6 total powers for 1 simple land? So you of course can build an army very quickly and very efficiently with this commander while also doing something that you want to do, which is just ramping, getting more and more lands into play to help you cast bigger and bigger spells, which of course might be things that might be able to pump your team or help them get through or draw a ton of cards, help you get more lands in play. Yeah, again, a very simple and straightforward commander that also actually can be a win condition in and of itself, if you actually are able to get it through. Its power and toughness is going to be an equal number of lanes you can play. You can very easily get this to a 2-shot KO or even a 1-shot KO if you can give it double strike in certain ways. But yeah, this commander, straightforward, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it can be quite powerful and, in my opinion, an A-tier commander. But now it's time for us to move on to the S tier, and actually, in my opinion, there is only one S tier commander from this list, and that is Kendrick Soulkindler. Kendrick is a 4/3 dwarf wizard that costs 2 red, white, and it has the legend rule doesn't apply to tokens you control. And whenever another non-token legendary permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do create a token that's a copy of it, the token gains haste, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So this commander can give you an absurd amount of additional value out of your legendaries. And again, that's any legendary permanent, not just limited to legendary creatures. And of course, this can give you even more value if, again, those legendary creatures might have, ETBs or LTBs, because, yeah, you just pay 1 mana, you get a copy of them. They obviously stick around temporarily because, the legend rules apply to them. But just for that 1 mana, again, if you're copying a, legendary creature that might have a massive ETB, you get that again, on top of actually, getting that token temporarily. Or if it's got a massive or, devastating LTB, like, some of the, Kamigawa Dragon Spirits, you can get even more value out of that as well because you're going to be sacrificing that token. You are forced to. And speaking of those tokens, you can also utilize populate effects in a fantastic way. I mean, a card like Song of the World Soul is incredible with this commander. Since the legend rule does apply to those tokens, well, when you get those legendary token creatures, you can just, populate and just make extra copies of them that will stick around. And if you can keep doing this again and again and again, there's some very absurd things that you can do this. So yeah, this commander just overall can provide you an absurd amount of value. Definitely game-changing and definitely game-ending value, and there's a lot of legendary creatures out there that would love to be copied with this. So again, at the end of the day, Kendrick Soulkindler, you are definitely worthy, in my opinion, of being considered to be an S-tier commander in comparison to all these other commanders. But of course, with these tier rankings, I would love to hear from you. Let me know what you agree with. Let me know what you disagree with. Let me know what your favorite commanders are from these, and yeah, of course, comment below. And as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.